Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
Good morning, and welcome to The Local Show. This is the first episode of a podcast series by Proudly South African in partnership with Social TV. My name is Tiamon Dlovu, and I'll be your host for The Local Show, where we'll be tackling and discussing all things related to the buy local movement, localization, procurement, job creation. And of course, for the first episode, we thought it would be best to introduce Proudly South African. And who better to do that than the CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Eustace Mashimbe. Eustace, welcome to The Local Show. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, thank you yourself. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, man. All right, let's get into it then. So tell us about Proudly South African. When did it start? How did it start? And what is it all about?
So Proudly South African was conceptualized in 1998 when the then president at the time, Nelson Mandela, convened a job summit. And the presidential job summit was aimed at arriving at solutions that would help create jobs and retain jobs. I think in the same way as President Ramaphosa hosted one in 2018. And one of the outcomes of that 1998 job summit was to create a buy local campaign for South Africa. And a few models were looked at throughout the world, and the Australian-made campaign was adopted. So Proudly South African was then introduced to the country, and it was modeled around the Australian-made campaign. So the campaign has been around for in excess of 20 years now. But officially opened its doors in 2001, which means operationally only for 18 years. But in terms of the work that was done, the work started in 1998, so 21 years ago. The work of Proudly South African started.
Okay. And tell us about the membership aspect of the campaign of Proudly South African.
So the membership of Proudly South African is built on the back of four key pillars. Any company that wants to associate with us has to comply with that, with those key pillars. It's criteria basically for membership. And the first one looks at where the product is made. So local content is quite critical for us in that we have to ensure that every single company that joins Proudly South African, uses our logo and participates in all our programs, makes its products locally, even if they're rendering services, that there's an element of local procurement that takes place when setting up the business, when procuring everything that is required by the business to render the service. So in instances where it's a production of a product, we want to see that the raw materials are procured locally and that they are transformed substantially into the final product locally. But where those raw materials are not available in the country, they have to be sourced from outside, but then as raw materials and come into the country and then are transformed within the borders of South Africa. So whether it's processing or beneficiation or actual transformation of the product, it must happen within the borders of South Africa so that jobs are created. Okay. That's the first thing we look at, is the production process. The second thing is quality. Okay. It's one thing to say to South Africans they must buy local, but you must ensure that what you take to the market is a high quality product which competes with the best in the world. And so we rely on third-party verification. So we look at what industry prescribes, and whatever is prescribed by that specific industry has to be what the company conforms with. So we don't give you membership, even if you make your product locally, but if we are not satisfied that the quality is right in terms of the product that is taken to market or the service levels are right, we don't. Okay. The other two are softer issues, but they're important. One is companies that affiliate with us have to comply with the labor legislation of the country. So we look at compliance with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. We look at employment contracts. We look at conditions of service, so that people are not employed and put in sweatshops, and that people are not paid slave wages, but that people comply with what is prescribed by the legislation in South Africa. Lastly, companies that affiliate with us have to implement sound environmental practices. Okay. So in instances where there's production or manufacturing, how do they dispose of their waste? Do they dispose of it responsibly? Can they reuse and recycle some of the material that they use and put it back into production? And where it's possible, are they able to participate in recycling programs? Okay. And so those are the four key criteria that members of Proudly South African have to comply with. So every time you see a company with a Proudly South African logo, the logo itself is made up of the colors of the Republic of South Africa, the flag of the national flag of the Republic of South Africa. which tells you that the product is locally made, and the green tick on the logo tells you that it's a high quality product.
Wonderful. All right, so it's local content, quality, labor legislation, and environmental policies. Now, is there a cost to be a member of Proudly South African? How does that work?
So the perception out there is that the cost attached to the membership is expensive, and I'm glad that you went there, because I think we have to clarify and clear this misperception. For an SMME whose turnover is 5 million rands and less, they have to pay 500 rands per annum. And then there's a sliding scale. For companies with turnover between 5 million and 10 million, they pay 1,000 rands. And so it goes.
And that's per annum.
That's per annum.
Yes.
And for the array of benefits that are attached to the membership, it's quite affordable. What we've done is, as part of the repositioning of the campaign, since I took over in 2016, that is what we do. One of the things we looked at with the board, with the new board that came in and appointed me, was to revise the membership fee, build on the value proposition, but also revise the fee. So the maximum that any corporate will have to pay to become a member of Proudly South African is 100,000 rands, but that is for companies with 100 million rands turnover and above. Companies at that level in the past used to pay 500,000 rands. So substantial reduction in fees, whilst also beefing up the value proposition.
So 5 times lower.
5 times lower.
That's amazing.
Sure.
Let's talk about the value proposition. What are the benefits that members can see? And what is there a range from, depending on what tier, I guess, that you are on? And yeah.
So our benefits are sort of ring-fenced for certain segments. So, for example, we have some benefits that are cut across, like the use of the logo on your products, the use of the logo on all your corporate material, your website, your letterhead, and everything else that is linked to your marketing collateral as an organization, whether it's your vehicles, whether it's your signage, and everything else that you put out. You can use the logo as a member of Proudly South African, irrespective of which level you are.
Okay.
But then the next set of benefits are linked mostly to access to markets. And the people who really derive a lot of benefit from our access to market programs are the smaller guys. So a smaller guy will come in and they will say they're battling to access certain markets, and as a campaign, if whatever markets they're trying to access are linked to other members, whether they're bigger or smaller, that's what we do. We encourage inter-member trade, and so we piggyback on that. We also run an import replacement program.
Yeah.
So the import replacement program helps us identify areas where products were previously imported, either by companies themselves or by retailers, etc. And we are able to then, as part of the conversations we're having with those companies that are bringing the products or are importing the products, we're able to then identify potential suppliers that would give them a local alternative, a locally made alternative. And that's where our members then become critical. The smaller guys benefit a lot from that. Because as an example, an ABSA will come and say, and which is what they've done, and a Standard Bank will come and say they want to buy locally made furniture going forward. Yeah. So the companies that are on our database that make furniture, irrespective of the size of the company, will benefit from that access to market opportunity that comes with it. The bigger guys generally want to benefit from being seen as good corporate citizens. So a Unilever will want to use the logo. It helps them to be seen as good corporate citizens, because the best place for them to use the logo is on the product itself. So as a consumer, when you walk through the shelves and you walk through any retail space where you are going to get your products, the minute you see a product with a Proudly South African logo, you already know that this corporate. As long as you understand the economic benefits that are linked to the Proudly South African campaign, or linked to the products that are made locally, as well as the fact that these companies have 4 key criteria that they have to conform with. When the minute you see the logo on a product, you know that this company is a good corporate citizen.
And they adhere to
the 4 key criteria. Yes. They're helping build the economy. So that is the biggest benefit from the big guys. They also run, some of the bigger guys run enterprise and supply development programs, and that's where we assist them. So the guys who are beneficiaries of the enterprise development and development programs generally become their suppliers, and they're capacitated on many issues. But what they then get stuck on is stuck at being the only supplier, the only customer, rather, for that enterprise and supply development beneficiary. So that's where we come in, where we absorb them and we open up opportunities for them. Okay. We do lobbying for some of our members, especially the bigger ones. We do a lot of lobbying, especially with regards to making sure that those who are trying to do business with government get their products designated for localization. So there's a lot of work that is done for the bigger guys.
Okay.
But for the smaller guys, the focus is really access to market.
All right. So tell us about access to market. There's the online shop, for example. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So that's one of the things that I think has been a flagship for the campaign over the last 2 years. We launched an online shop initially targeted at business to consumer kind of setup where as a consumer you could go in and buy any product you want. But what we've done is we've built in business to business capability into the system itself. So if you go to rsamade.co.za, as a consumer you can find a product that you want and make a purchase. But as a business you can go in, get quotations, get your quotations accepted, get invoiced, make payment through that portal. So businesses can actually transact with each other whilst conforming and complying with their own internal processes, because that system has capability to allow them to transact in that regard. So what it does is that it has given an opportunity for Proudly SA members to take their products to market, irrespective of how you are selling a product as a member of Proudly South African. It's just an additional point of sale.
Yes.
Where consumers who want to support the Buy Local campaign know where to go. Because about accessibility, people said to us in the past, they want to support the campaign, but they don't necessarily know where to find the products. And this has helped us bridge that gap. So corporates can go and buy and sell to each other. Consumers, I mean, now it's festive season. So we're gearing ourselves up for the festive season. We're starting with a Black Friday special on RSA Made, where our companies that are selling their products on there will then attach certain discounts so that consumers can go onto the site, but also that for the festive season, there are ideas for gifts that are on that site. There are ideas for what people buy over the festive season. Everything that you ideally buy, whether it's clothing, whether it's books, whether it's crafts, whether it's some electronics are now on there, baby stuff is on there. So you're able to go in and find what you're looking for and buy it on the site, knowing that you're supporting jobs in the country.
And I think what I really like about the online shop is that, especially for the small guys, is that if you're looking for access to market, being online means your product is available literally around the world. So that's a lovely thing that I like about the online shop. If you can tell us about some of maybe the main challenges that not just the small guys, but local manufacturers in general are facing here in South Africa.
I think the biggest challenge right now, and that is what is decimating a lot of the industries that are labor intensive, that are able to absorb the skilled, the unskilled, the semi-skilled, is the imports. Imports, whether they come in legally or illegal. I mean, the illegal ones are a big problem. This illicit trade that is happening in the country is a big problem. But some of the legal imports are also problematic, because then when they get to the ports of entry, they are under-invoiced. I mean, people declare a whole table that would cost, that would be sold for 10 rands, but when it's declared at customs, it's declared for 1,000 rands. So you can definitely see that there is no way that the cost of that item can be that low. So that is the biggest challenge, where these products are coming in at ridiculously low prices, and as a result, our guys can't compete. Because the input costs when you're making a product locally are at a certain level. And so when someone brings it in at a ridiculously low price, you can't sell it for less than what you make it for. And that is the biggest challenge. So we're battling illegal imports where there are those challenges, but illegal imports are decimating a lot of industries. We've seen a lot of factories close down. My favorite examples are the furniture industry and the clothing and textiles industry, where factories have closed down. Jobs have been shed simply because of the imports that are coming into the country.
Okay, and how can we then make a difference as Proudly South African in the purchasing habits of not just consumers, but also of the private sector and of the public sector?
So our flagship project outside of the online shop has been getting localization commitments, where we go out and we talk to those responsible for buying in the private sector. And the two examples I gave earlier on was Absa and Standard Bank, where we said, what are those items that you're buying, we're spending some money on? Give us a list of those items and let us interrogate the list so that we can see if there are opportunities to bring in local manufacturers. So furniture is a good example that I gave earlier on, where the banks said they buy a lot of furniture, whether they buy when they open the branches or when they replenish old furniture and they want to bring in new furniture. So the agreement was that they would buy furniture locally. So we've engaged everyone in the financial services space, in the hotels group space, anyone who we know buys a lot of furniture, because I think that's how a campaign like ours is going to make a huge impact very quickly. Is to get those who are buying a lot of items, spending a lot of money to support those industries. So So look at what is happening in the public sector where government has designated certain items, and the designation basically says if anyone in government, whether national government, provincial government, local government, or as well as in any state-owned entity, if they buy any of those items, they have to buy them from companies that make them locally. And even if you're a tenderpreneur and you're a middleman that bids for these tenders, the end product that you're going to buy and supply to government must come from a local source. So what we do in that regard is to help drive up compliance levels. Because the problem is sometimes you come up with the best policies, but compliance and implementation of those policies is a problem. So in this regard, it's people still issuing tenders for designated items without necessarily attaching those conditions that says only locally made products will be bought. So in that regard, Proudly South African then works hard with government to make sure that we train every single procurement official in government. We have a roadshow where we go into all 9 provinces. We engage with state-owned entities. Once a year, we meet with the heads of all state-owned entities in their procurement forum. And we engage with them on the challenges and the bottlenecks that they're encountering in implementing these designations, but also in looking at ways in which when buying anything that is not necessarily designated as government, they can issue the tenders or the request for proposals in the same way that they would for a designated item, where they would say, as a city of Joburg, we're buying the specific item, and we know there's capacity in the country, so we are going to attach a condition that says only local manufacturers will be considered. So that's the role of Proudly South African. We even have a tender monitoring system that helps us track these tenders when they are issued. Because through that system, we're able to intervene when the tender is issued by government to say, you've issued a tender for furniture, you're buying desks for schools that you're building in the Eastern Cape, but the condition that says only locally made desks will be bought is not there. So we intervene when the tenders are issued so that we avoid having legal issues at the end after the tenders have been awarded.
Wonderful. So you touched on the private sector and on the public sector and how we educate them and get them to adhere to the buy local movement. What examples of programs or educational programs do we have for the consumers, for you and I?
So one of the things that we have to intensify as a campaign, and I think if you think back to when the campaign was launched, when the campaign opened its doors rather in 2001, there was a lot of money in this campaign. I think corporates, it was the Mandela euphoria and it was the Mandela magic, and companies just wanted to pump money into this thing. And people saw it as a project that they need to support. So there was a lot of money, and that's why they could roll out consumer education campaigns, whether in schools, whether on TV and on radio and on billboards. And ideally, that's what you need for a campaign like this. You need to be top of mind. And because it's about changing mindsets. Consumers have an affinity towards certain brands that they've been buying for years, brands that they've been consuming, certain products that they trust. So you have to shift them from those products that might be imported to ones that are locally made. So in order to achieve that, you have to be top of mind. It's constant messaging. So you have to be on TV, you have to be on radio. When people drive down the freeway, they must see the billboards. When they're waiting for the train at the How train station or at the Prasa station, they must see the message. When they're waiting for their bags at the airport, those carousels, they must see the message. So it must be in people's faces all the time. So because of lack of sufficient funding to achieve that, what we've done over the last few months is to work on acquiring partnerships. And with major broadcasters, including the public broadcaster. And the idea is that for the festive season, we should launch a campaign that will take us into those platforms. We've sent out letters to state-owned entities. So we've said to AXA, you own the airport TV platforms that are there with whoever is your service provider. Give us space to advertise. We've said to PRASA, the metro rail stations, allow us to advertise. We've spoken to the How train to give us space. We said to Post Office and Telcom and SASA, we said people walk through your doors daily looking for one or another service. There's all these opportunities that are there for us to use some of the collateral that is at your disposal to advertise and the buy local message so that people see it all the time. So we're hoping that we get these partnerships approved and signed off, and even if we don't go live with all of them for the festive season, but that in 2020 we go live on all these platforms, and that so that we ensure that there's a sustained messaging across all those platforms so that consumers see it on TV, hear it on radio, they see it everywhere. And such that they then get to a point where, because the messaging is quite clear, where they understand what the economy-wide benefits of buying local are.
Exactly. Sure. And what would you say to, unfortunately seen a few people who even boast about, buying international brands. And given the option of whether they'd buy local or international, they'd rather go for the international suits and stuff. What would you say to try and convince that person to purchase locally made goods?
Look, and I think before I respond to that, I think one of the things that I must touch on is the fact that social media plays such an important role. And that's why currently, despite not having all these platforms that I spoke about earlier on, we rely a lot on digital marketing, and social media is quite important for us. So we place messaging on social media because that's where you find a lot of those people who, especially the middle class and those above the middle class or the working class and higher. That's where you find all of these purchasing decisions made in favor of imported products. It's because of brand affinities, because of it's because it gives them a certain sense of status when they have those brands. So we have to find brands that we can build up to that level. We have to find ways to educate consumers that there is an equally good product. I mean, one of the things that I keep saying to people, and people might be offended, is the fact that despite the fact that Louis Vuitton and Versace might not necessarily be Chinese, but their products are made in China.
Correct.
And you're buying a product made in
That's
China,
true, yeah.
and you're going on social media and you're boasting about the quality. And whereas we have factories in South Africa that can make equally good products. So it's an education thing where at some stage we hope we can get to a point where the class and status that is attached to those brands can be attached to some of the brands. I mean, look at Matrosa.
Yes.
Matrosa's garments and items in general are high quality. And I'm just using him as an example because he's a member of Proudly South African. Look at the Skinny Spoo socks.
Yes.
Look at what comes out of the factories that supply Edcon. I mean, I keep saying to people, the same brand you were buying at Edgar's a few years ago when they were importing is the same brand and same garment, same quality that you're buying from Edgar's now. The difference is that Edgar's is no longer placing the order in Bangladesh and China, but they're placing it at a factory in KZN and the Western Cape. And that's the only difference. But when you walk in, it's still the same brand and same garment that is supplied by your favorite retailer. And that is the mindset shift that we're looking to get to.
And I think what's also important is that for someone to remember that once you buy local, you're creating a job for someone, because as we've mentioned before, and as I've heard you mention before, that the reality as South Africans is that we all know someone who is unemployed. And once you buy local, that means you're creating the demand for that product that is made locally. That means you're creating and sustaining more jobs. So I think that is amazing. You spoke about the clothing and textile sector. What other industry sectors do you put special emphasis on?
So it's the labor intensive sectors. We've done a lot of work on the poultry industry. I mean, we know the jobs have been decimated because of the imports that come from Brazil and the EU, and some of it from the US based on the AGOA agreement. And we've tried to say to South Africans, and in fact, there's a plan to start conceptualizing a campaign to just say to South Africans, there's a poultry product on every South African dinner table or breakfast table or lunch table at some point in the day, whether it's a nugget or it's it's
chicken wing.
There is a poultry product that is consumed at some point. So we're saying choose the one that is locally made because then it supports a job in the country and it flows from what you said earlier on. So the poultry industry we've supported. The furniture industry is a key priority sector for us. Clothing and textiles, like you said, is key. We've worked on the pharmaceuticals industry and we continue to do a lot of work and continue to engage the public sector to say, when you issue tenders, we are still seeing tenders. I mean, the tender for ARVs that was issued this year, a big chunk of that tender still went to companies in India where there are no jobs in South Africa. All they have is 2 representatives of people who are meant to look out for these opportunities, submit bids, facilitate receiving orders, sending them to India, let the products come in and supply them to hospitals and clinics in South Africa. So that's another industry that we've looked at. The next one that we've started doing work on over the past 3 months is the automotive industry. We're seeing the master plan that has been launched, which says at least 65% of the content that makes up the cars that are made in South Africa by 2035 must be local. So 65% local content is what they're aspiring to get to by 2035. But also that the target is to make sure that at least 1% of all cars that are made globally are made in South Africa. So that ambitious drive will need South Africans to also buy those cars, because remember, there's automotive OEMs have to bid for the opportunity for them to make the contract, the cars here. So for example, the Roslin plant, the Roslin BMW plant must compete with other BMW plants all over the world for them to make certain brands. They've won the opportunity to make the X5, but we're saying there needs to be high levels of local content. But in order for them to keep making it and to retain those jobs in that plant, we need to make sure that South Africans themselves buy those cars, and that is the
Yes.
education that must go into it.
Wonderful.
So that's another industry we're looking at.
Okay. All right. Before I let you go, Eustace, can you just tell us, give us examples of some of Proudly South African success stories that just come to mind?
Look, I think the biggest success stories come from the fact that the clothing and textile retailers are really supportive. I mean, the Foschini Group is a member of Proudly South African. Edcon is a member of Proudly South African, and the levels of local content in those stores were very low. If you go to mere 10 years ago, all the orders were going to factories outside of South Africa. Now the orders have been brought back.
Yeah.
If you look at the success stories that are linked to the likes of SAB, which is a member of Proudly South African, where at least 95 to 97% of the content that makes up that beer that is sold to us is made locally.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola Beverages of South Africa, same as members of Proudly South African, they're doing that. So we're finding the likes of Unilever, Nestle, and some of these guys who had left the campaign and have come back as a result of the enhanced value proposition, but also the fact that they can see that the campaign is now on an upward trajectory. So they want to associate with the campaign, and they all want to contribute to this growth of the economy. So that is one of the biggest things. The other thing that is important is the fact that in the public sector, there is that legislation.
Yeah.
We as a campaign, we piggyback on that legislation because it helps us achieve what you need to achieve.
Awesome. All right. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, from us here at The Local Show. Eustace, thank you so much for joining us. We were broadcasting live, actually, from Proudly South African's offices. Please do join us next time on The Local Show. Follow Proudly South African across all social media. We are at Proudly SA on Twitter. We are at proudly.sa on Instagram. And just go to our website for more information. That's www.proudlysa.co.za. Cheers.
We started with so much hope. We opened the doors and the light poured in. But then, slowly at first, things stopped working. And people had to leave. Maybe we were careless or indifferent. After all, we made all the decisions. We chose to buy imported goods instead of our own. We thought we'd lost it all. Our jobs, our businesses, our hope. But it doesn't have to be this way. By choosing to buy local, we buy back jobs and the future we were destined for.